Is DoorDash passing the buck onto your customers? In a recent announcement, DoorDash says it's testing a new system to warn customers who don't tip, urging folks to reconsider before they complete their order. Here's how it works. When a customer chooses to leave no tip, a pop-up appears on the screen reading, "Orders with no tip take longer to get delivered. Are you sure you want to continue?" And this made me think, if delivery drivers were less dependent on their tips, would service to your customers improve? And I went a little further down the rabbit hole. Is tipping outdated? Should we get rid of it altogether? We're going to dig into DoorDash's announcement, what it means for operators, and the pros and cons of tipping in Western culture. We're going deep, people. Let's grow. Welcome to the Restaurant Growth Show podcast, where we talk about how operators can use technology to grow their business. We've got a lot to talk about in this episode, but first, let's introduce our co-host. With more than 25 years of online marketing experience, Jose Albas has successfully founded and operated companies in software and hospitality. Lastly, who am I? My name is Gordon. I am your host. I have over 16 years in the food service industry with more than a decade in technology startups. This podcast is sponsored by Dynpricing, real-time restaurant profitability. Dynpricing uses artificial intelligence to improve profitability for restaurants by dynamically updating menus across digital channels. Jose, what's going on today?
Just thinking and reminiscing on all the pieces of experience as a customer, even as a driver at some point when we were creating modern, and it was fun. It was the beginning. So I bet it's changed quite a bit, but I'm ready to share some of the insights that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that you did some firsthand research when you were developing modern online ordering, and you did your due diligence on actually seeing what delivery drivers and restaurateurs themselves are experiencing with third-party delivery, all of the pros and cons and all of the things that are involved with that process. So I'm interested to hear your reaction to DoorDash's recent announcement. Again, just to recap from the top of the show, DoorDash announced it's testing a new system to warn customers who don't tip. It's urging people to reconsider before they complete their orders. And thus, if there is no tip and a dasher, as they're called, the delivery drivers with DoorDash, if a dasher sees that there is no tip involved with that particular order, they may not necessarily be so eager to deliver that, begging the question, as I mentioned before, do you think that maybe if delivery drivers for third-party platforms were paid a little bit better, do you think maybe this could be less of an issue?
Indeed, I think that we're all feeling the pinch with inflation, and I think that definitely there is a space for that to be on the technology company. There is more proof, and it continues evolving into that the gig economy, there should be some more responsibilities on their side. And it makes sense, because when the consumer doesn't tip, it really hurts the driver, right? There's no discussion there. Someone that is putting their time, their gas, they're moving around, they're going into apartments, upstairs, downstairs, running to try to be on the clock, right? And the tip, it is a gratuity. That extension, it should be a motivation for the driver in this case to do an amazing service, to be in communication with the client, to just go that extra step. And that's what tip is. A tip, it's like that extra tip, that extra piece of money that I'm going to give you, because it was exceptional, or it was a good, or it was some type of service, right? Some quality of service. So I think that the fixed portion, which is the guaranteed income for the drivers, it's more like it should be on the technology side for sure.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I keep coming back to this reliance on tipping, and not just for delivery drivers. And we'll get into this backwards thinking in terms of tipping before you actually receive the service. I think that customers have a beef there, pun intended. So I just feel like DoorDash is shirking responsibility for enabling a service that restaurants are now dependent upon, delivery drivers are dependent upon. Are you trying to tell me that a enormous, massive company like DoorDash is unable to pay delivery drivers a little bit more so that they're not so reliant upon this tip. Now, I know going back, tipping in the hospitality industry, wages have always been really low, and the tip has been built into what they make. But is it time that we shift that thinking? Is it time to question tipping altogether? I'm really, really struggling with a large corporation like DoorDash pointing the finger at the little guys, going, no, 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 you, the customer, you need to pay more of a percentage in order to fulfill this service. Or no, 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 to the delivery drivers, you're being penalized if you refuse to take a delivery with no tip. And it seems something is amiss here. What do you think?
Well, from my experience, even though it was years ago, so the situation was a little bit different. Inflation was not that high. Cost of living, it was more affordable, and it was the beginning of the industry. So when it started here in Victoria, I was probably one of the first 10 or something like that. Because of the work we were doing with Modern, I've been following of from the inception, Skip the Dishes. When they came here, they didn't even have official bags. Like they sent me this bag I had to purchase, and then it was like really crazy, but they were throwing incentives all the time, right? So the incentives that exist back in those days, it was like $20 a day, $15 after you do 5, 10, or 5 deliveries. Sometimes it was like $40. I remember one time they offered me to see if I wanted to deliveries on a particular day. But if you see, it's them putting that there. So there is space for them to share more. That's for sure. Because when they need it, they're able to do this. $2 extra per delivery on a Saturday night. So if that is there, then most likely there could be more incentives. Yeah, it's the usual thing of incentives. If you start with certain thing, then Saturday is going to be plus $5 per delivery, right? But there is a balance, and I think that it does make you a happier deliverer.
Delivery person, yes.
I have stories of families that were kind of laughing at me looking at the map because I couldn't find the address. The whole family was outside the house. And then they threw me $50 as a tip. When I arrived, we interacted and just started laughing, and the kids were laughing, having such a good time that the guy's like, oh my God, I love it. This is great, right? And also the conscious like, okay, this guy is working hard, right? So that part is something that if they were maybe able to take that angle rather than they're going to be mean at you without a tip, maybe it's a better approach. So why not play more to that angle, to the compassion, the acknowledgement that these drivers are sometimes risking their lives to do a delivery on time. And at night, there's a lot of elements that go into the delivery that could be more powerful to persuade than what that they're doing, basically scaring them that potentially the food is going to be crappy.
And I wonder what is the effect on the operators themselves, the day-to-day managers fulfilling these orders, setting them up ready for delivery drivers. If there is no tip, how does that affect the operator themselves? I've heard some horror stories, and there are some sayings going on in the delivery driver community, like no tip, no trip. And so it's almost a threat, really. And so obviously it's going to damage the operator, because if their order doesn't get to where it's supposed to go, you're going to see an angry customer. They can turn around and they can write a bad review. They can take their business elsewhere. There's repercussions.
Yeah, delivery drivers can have an impact definitely on the restaurant as well. So there is a responsibility there, but I think that the restaurants themselves are paying high commissions already. So there's only 1-2 spaces, and we know one of them is going through inflation and making decisions about tipping. The other one, it's in control of the whole system.
For sure. And that also harms the process of converting a third-party delivery customer into first-party online ordering. It's a really delicate ecosystem, and putting the onus back on the customer to make the tip, or they're not going to get a delivery as fast as they would like. And I am beating a dead horse here, but here's the thing. There's a thing called hangry that you know very, very well. We've all experienced it. You're hungry, you're waiting for food, you're not thinking straight. Then you get this irate customer, you get this customer calling a restaurant, they're really tearing into this poor person on the other end, or they're sending angry text messages to their delivery driver, or they're writing a really nasty Google review. Look, the average guest is feeling the pinch of inflation too. So why are you pointing at me telling me that I need to pay a certain percentage tip even before I get my order, which kind of brings us to the bigger point that we were trying to make here. Is tipping an outdated process? Should we move away from tipping altogether? And so I put together a short list of pros and cons of tipping. Let's quickly run through the arguments for tipping culture and the arguments against. What do you say, Jose?
Let's go.
All right. Arguments for the tipping culture. Number one, it incentivizes better service. Proponents argue that tipping motivates servers to provide excellent customer service since their income depends directly on the satisfaction of the customers. This goes to what we were just talking about. Should restaurateurs depend on tipping to pay their bills?
And that's the key word, right? To make the living.
Exactly. Yeah, that's really contentious in my opinion. Number two, an argument for tipping culture. It supplements income. Tips significantly boost the earnings of workers in the industry who might otherwise be earning minimum wage or less. Considering the sub-minimum wage for tipped employees in some regions, I'm looking at you, United States. There are a lot of states that are paying below minimum wage to service workers, and folding in tipping into their take-home pay, really just getting them to the minimum, the bare minimum, and that's still not paying the bills. All right, number three, these are not very good arguments for tipping culture, in my opinion. Number three, cultural norm and expectation. So tipping is ingrained in North American culture. Customers often expect to tip for services rendered, and it's a socially accepted way to show appreciation for good service. I agree with this. It is culturally expected in North America, but again, the dependency has gone the other way far, far too much.
I think that the dependency and the abuse of it, like there's like some locations and businesses that where you're doing your own stuff, and why would you tip if there was no service to you?
Exactly. All right. We are on number four, argument for tipping culture. It allows pricing flexibility. So this affects the operators themselves. Restaurants and service providers can offer lower base prices because tips are expected to make up the difference in staff wages. This is terrible, which can attract a broader customer base.
Down economics, trickle down economics.
Yeah, I'm not buying that. For a mom and pop shop, maybe they've got to rub 2 cents together. They've got to really be creative and find different ways to make things work. But again, depending on tipping, depending on the gratuitousness of your clients or your customers over a long period of time, is not a winning business model. All right, number six here for the argument for tipping culture, immediate feedback mechanism. Tipping provides immediate feedback for the staff, allowing them to adjust their service level in real time. In my experience, there are some people out there who are, and forgive me for saying this, but they are weaponizing tipping because they are threatening to not tip unless they get service just the way they want it. I guess, in a high-end service space, okay, but for the majority of us, come on, they're tipping for going above and beyond, yes. But again, I don't know. I'm getting all heated on this topic. Okay, so we've got a list here for arguments against tipping culture, and no surprise to anyone, there are a lot more arguments against tipping culture. Let's start off with number one, income inconsistency. Tipping can lead to unpredictable income for employees. Earnings can fluctuate based on factors outside of employees' control, such as seasonal changes, shift hours, and economic downturn. All right. Tipping encourages discrimination. Studies have shown that tipping can perpetuate discrimination, with biases affecting who gets tipped more or less, regardless of the actual service level provided. I don't really want to dig into this too much because this is an even more heated topic.
Yeah, There's too much of human condition and biases there in that.
All right. Number 3, shift wage responsibility. Critics argue that tipping shifts the responsibility of paying workers from employer to the customer, which can lead to exploitation of workers and wage theft. I'm looking at you, DoorDash. This is exploitation to the nth degree. This, to me, is exactly what big business is doing to the little guy, and they need to look inward.
Yeah, the biggest part of the controversy here, it's that the fact that, well, the consumer in the beginning, they don't know what to expect. Given that there is another opportunity to tip after, but still, the drivers could start really bad with a 450 total estimated that you don't know how it's going to end. And you do a great job, and then it just happens that this person didn't tip anything, even if you do a great service. So that makes it very unfair.
Agreed. The number 4 argument against tipping culture in North America: tipping can lead to harassment. The reliance on tips can make employees tolerate inappropriate behavior from customers, fearing that standing up for themselves could result in a lower tip. This is the weaponization that I was talking about earlier, waving that $5, $10 bill, saying you're not going to get your tip unless I get things exactly the way I want them. And sometimes those are ridiculous requests.
It just builds almost like a caste system. This lead to harassment, where you're like servitude, not just a servant.
Total servitude. I agree. All right. Number 5, tipping complicates financial transparency. Tipping complicates the process of financial tracking for both employees and employers, making it difficult to report income accurately for taxes and benefits. As if doing your taxes isn't complicated enough, tipping just adds to that gray area where it's just overcomplicated. It really shouldn't be that problematic, yet here we are.
Everything goes through the app and into your bank account, which is all very traceable, and the government would want on the total. I may be wrong, but if there's benefit on tips or recognition of some kind of a tax exemption or something, I'm not aware of it, but it would be really hard. Government's a government. They want to go after everything.
Yeah, it's a tough one. All right. Number 6, arguments against tipping culture in North America. Tipping creates customer discomfort. I'm all in on this one. Customers may feel uncomfortable with the social pressure to tip, uncertain about how much to tip, or maybe unaware of tipping customs, leading to anxiety around the tipping process. I think a lot of people are experiencing this with the tablet payment system nowadays. Say if you're in a lineup, people can see over your shoulder, how much you choose. Is it 15? Is it 18? Is it 20%? Is it no tip? Are they going to be judged for the amount that they tip? This can make people really anxious and uncomfortable throughout this whole process.
Guilt tipping, it's terrible. And if you're a regular, it's even worse, because what am I going to do all this the same amount all the time? And sometimes those tablets that they pass it on to you, the person's taller than you, they can see everything. You're not going to flip it, and also ridiculous. Then the person behind can see, yeah, it's guilt. That's the guilt tipping.
It's just such an awkward scenario. Like, are you offending this person? Are they really looking inward and questioning their ability to really do their job well? I mean, all of this can be avoided, right?
Right.
Okay. Number 7, disparity among employees. There can be a significant income disparity between front of house staff who receive tips and back of house staff like cooks and dishwashers who typically do not share in tips contribute equally to the customer experience. Now, I've worked in restaurants where tip sharing goes front and back of house. There are some restaurants that don't share. So I don't really agree with this. What I thought was that the disparity among employees, if you've got someone who is really outgoing or really good at the job, really experienced, or has a long list of regulars, they are likely going to get better tips than someone that is newer, maybe a little bit more inexperienced. That's a kind of disparity among employees that can drive a divide amongst the team that's on the floor. And so I could see some disparity there, but tip sharing typically, in my experience, is shared front of house to back of house.
Yeah, cohesive teamwork, right? We're one kind of thing. I think that's, yeah, it's up to the operator, but it would have an impact in the culture. No,
It's almost like working on straight commission. If you've ever worked in sales before, the difference in take home pay for someone who is really good at their job or has a really strong customer base, it's going to be a lot bigger than someone who's just new learning the job and may never get to that point. So number 8 in the arguments against tipping culture in North America, the possibility of poor service without accountability. Some believe that a no tipping model would ensure that all customers receive the same level of service as employees are paid a stable wage, regardless of the individual interaction. I mean, I'm looking at it like these peaks and valleys of good service and not so good service, and removing tipping may level out that playing field. I think that's the point that they're trying to make with removing tipping or going with a no tip model that would ensure customers receive the same level of service. So if I go above and beyond, it's not really going to matter. Now, the argument against that is, well, no one's going to be going that extra mile because they know they're not going to get paid extra. Well, you'll never be able to fully remove tipping because no one is stopping a customer from reaching in their wallet and going, you know what? No, you did go above and beyond. It's that expectation of tip culture that I think that is soiling what's supposed to be the ability to go above and beyond.
Correct. The abusive aspect here has become, which is that the tip is no longer a tip.
It's expected.
It should be called something else.
That's another episode right there. How do we rebrand tipping? Or not rebrand it, but...
Well, yeah, because it would be, I mean, if we want to be really frank about this thing, then it should be, instead of tip, it should be top up someone's income, right?
Yeah, that was a really good point that you made. All right, that's all the time we have for this episode. I'm going to end with these thoughts. DoorDash's latest maneuver raises a crucial question for restaurateurs. What is the true cost of a tip? It's more than just a few extra dollars on the tab. It's about the value we place on service and the balance of responsibility between customer, server, and business. Until next week, everyone, say goodbye, Jose.
Bye, Jose.
All right, that was good.